welcome to Labor Lens. I am Sharon Ijason. On this week edition of the program, we'll be focusing on the organized private sector, some of the challenges they are faced with, and also their expectations from the government and other stakeholders. We will be right back.
Finally, the Upper Legislative Chamber receives an executive communication from President Bola Tinubu containing the new minimum wage for Nigerian workers. This comes a few days after the federal government and Nigerian Labour Congress reached an agreement of 70,000 naira as the new minimum wage. The Senate suspended its Rule 78 Sub 1 to permit the express consideration and passage of the bill.
A bill for an act to amend the National Minimum Wage Act 2019 and to increase the national minimum wage and reduce the time for periodic review of the national minimum wage from 5 years to 3 years and for related matters 2024. Third reading.
In response to the agitations and after a series of negotiations between the federal government and the organized labor, the current national minimum wage of 30,000 naira only has been reviewed upward to the sum of 70,000 naira only. This is part of the federal government's short-term measures to mitigate the situation in the country, as efforts are being made to bring about long-term solutions that would align with the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians and bring succor to the country generally.
The bill was committed to the Committee of the Whole for a clause-by-clause consideration and was passed after a voice vote.
A bill for an act to amend the National Minimum Wage Act 2019 to increase the national minimum wage from 30,000 to 70,000 and to reduce the time for periodic review of the national minimum wage from 5 years to 3 years and for related matters 2024. Third reading taken and passed.
According to the new minimum wage bill, the wages for workers will now be reviewed every 3 years. This is indeed a new dawn for Nigerian workers as hope rises as they look forward to the full implementation of this new wage.
Barely 48 hours after the two chambers of the National Assembly gave accelerated consideration and approval to the 70,000 naira minimum wage, the Trade Union Congress says Nigerian workers await presidential assent. The Congress commends the Parliament for expeditious delivery on the bill and calls on President Bola Tinubu to sign it into law.
As this has been passed by the respective National Assembly, waiting for the assent of the President, we hereby call on the respective state governors to ensure that this minimum wage is implemented to the latter. Whenever the President signs it, which we urge him to sign the minimum wage act immediately into law.
The Congress also speaks on the raging crisis between Dangote Refinery and the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, NMDPRA. TUC says if not nipped in the bud, the feud may impact negatively on foreign investment.
The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria should bring all of them together and give them a marching order to go and resolve whatsoever issues that they have. Because the challenges that you may have, whenever we go to the press, whenever we go to public, and we keep castigating one another, we keep castigating each other, it is going to drive away investment.
And as the planned nationwide protest draws close, TUC calls on the Inspector General of Police, Kaode Egbetokun, and other security chiefs to guarantee safety of lives and property.
We don't want a situation whereby the protest goes on and at the end of the day it leads to violence. So we want to hereby call on the Inspector General of Police and the entire security agencies to do everything possible to provide security.
The Congress renews its call on the Central Bank of Nigeria to address the flotation of the naira so as to stabilize the economy and for the cost of goods and services to come down.
It's the 67th annual general meeting of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. President of NECA, who addressed members of the association, lamented the challenges facing employers of labor and the need for the federal government and other stakeholders to create more favorable policies for businesses to thrive.
It is no longer secret that private businesses in the economy are beset with innumerable challenges, pushing many to the realm of mere subsistence. The below remains some of our current key concerns. 1, high cost of doing business due to depreciation in the value of the naira, increased custom forex rate for clearing of cargoes, business antagonistic regulations, proliferation of provocative taxes and levies. Above all, most worrisome, the so-called oversight function of the National Assembly.
In their goodwill messages, President of the Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) Joe Ajero and other stakeholders emphasized the need for effective collaboration to enhance industrial growth in all strata.
You have to be involved, and that's why I'm here to tell NECA that you have to work with us. When they increase tariff and you keep quiet, you suffer it. We suffer it. Sorry to say this, because it is telling more on business. You can't do business in the present day Nigeria with this tariff regime. It's biting. So it's not the salary you are paying the worker that is affecting business, but the ease of doing business in Nigeria is the major problem. The House of Rep and the Senate, they are meeting to make sure that they decentralize labor, wage. You and I know that wage, the ILO, is a national law.
Another important function is that to support members and build capacity in different areas. And I'm aware that NECA has also partnered with many other institutions to achieve this very important role. And I'm very happy that in the many endeavors, NECA has also used some of the ILO, IOE tools that we have developed to support member capacity.
Newly admitted members of the association received their certificates of membership at the event. On the profile interview segments this week, I'll be speaking with the immediate past president of the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association. He shares with us what his experience was like to serve as NECA's president for 5 years. He also spoke about some of the economic challenges Nigeria is faced with and provides solutions. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you.
And congratulations on a successful outing. It's been 5 years showing leadership at the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, which is the body that represents employers of labor in the country. Can you share with us what the experience was like?
Yeah, thank you, as always. I'll tell you, it was one experience that will live with me for a long time to come. Because I came into office almost not at the time I should have come. We had a president who passed on. And at that time, I was the first vice president. And so I stepped in as the president. And it then immediately occurred to me that, yes, we have to do some very, very quick fixings here and there and to get the association going forward and not allow that there be any form of vacuum.
The beautiful thing was the fact that I was already in council. I've been a member of council. I was a former treasurer. So, and I was part of management. So being part of management didn't make it an entirely new thing for me. I've always been part of the decision-making committee. So it wasn't particularly difficult to settle in. Just immediately after the shock of it, we then settled in and we got on working. And it was indeed a very, very good experience for me at that level, leading an association of eminent CEOs that runs businesses in Nigeria. Both in terms of helping me to also run the business I run, and the fact that you are able to rub minds with people of like mind. It actually helped, and everybody had every reason to work together because we were pursuing a common goal. So that was a very good one for me.
As the president of NECA, I think that must be the longest time anyone has spent as president of NECA, if I'm right. I stand to be corrected. But it was along the line when you emerged as president that we had the COVID-19 pandemic. How were you able to manage running the affairs of the association at that point in time?
You're right to say that, well, maybe probably the longest. And what happened? The president was on his first term of 2 years, and then he had barely spent 1 year when he passed on. So I had to act as the president to complete that particular term, and then was now elected as the president. And soon after that happened, I remember very well, I think that was in July 2019 was when I became the acting president. And just about the time we were settling in, COVID came. And when COVID came, of course, we were clear in our mind that businesses must not suffer. At the same time, we were also very careful to make sure that we do not lose any of our staffs. So what did we do? We had a series of, number one, there was a shutdown. So, of course, at such moment, nobody could do anything. But when the government now started relaxing the shutdown periods, when it became clear as to what can be done to not particularly shut down businesses for economic reasons. So we had, were in the team that the government put together to work and make sure that we make our companies to run within the ambient of safety. So we worked with state governments for periods of, for those who are producing, the periods they can produce, for those who are providing service, the periods they can provide service, and putting in place all of the COVID-19 protocols. We championed it. We committed to government to say that, look, as concerning the various businesses, business that are members of our association, we are committed to making sure that they run within the protocols, approved protocols, and also maintain as much as possible safety along the work environment. And to the glory of God, we didn't lose any of our staff members or any member of staff of our, member companies to COVID. Neither did any of the businesses lay off staff members.
Yeah, I remember very clearly that there was this agreement then that the government had when they made the announcement that they wouldn't want any worker to lose their job during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. So how were you able to get other member companies to agree to this agreement and to ensure that the workers did not actually lose their job because of the pandemic?
Some of the things we had to do, innovative things we had to come up with, was one, common environment. In other words, some company provided staff bus facility where you know that once you move them, you are moving them as a group. Some provided accommodations to say, okay, if you don't go home, because it's all about contact. So they provided some form of accommodation to make sure that, okay, if you don't go home, then we are sure that, okay, it's just from the factory. As long as we have kept the factory safe, or we have kept the environment of work safe, and you don't go home, we guarantee that you are safe to some extent. They also provided the work timings. So those who can work from home, so that if you are not directly involved in, for instance, if it's a production environment, if you're not directly involved in production, if it's service that you provide or support service that you provide for that work, then you can work from home. So we started with that, and that reduced the number of people that would have to go to work part-time. Now, once
that was the beginning of the hybrid model of working.
Yes.
Which some people
So,
still do today.
up to today, some have adopted it. Because don't forget, sometimes the time you spend on the road of Lagos to get to work, or on the road generally, not just Lagos, the cosmopolitan cities, the time you spend on the road getting to work, by the time you get to work, the time it takes you to settle down and settle into work, all of that was taken out. So there were huge investment in technology to be able to do and support all of those work functions. And then it became the new work style, because people saw that rather than productivity decline, productivity actually increased. Because once you log in, you can't log out. You are there. You spend more time. But in the office, sometimes you spend your time checking your emails. Sometimes you spend your time going to see your friend that you have not seen, your colleague that you have not seen, and then you go there. Sometimes you go and sit at meetings, and you're just there. But with COVID, if you book a Zoom time, the Zoom time is the Zoom time. You do the meeting and you go out. Commitment. And then everybody then came to understand that, look, if it's 1 hour, then it has to be 1 hour. There is no pleasantries that goes on, and then you end up losing the essence of the meeting. So it shaped the way of work and provided opportunity to see it in a new way. Meetings now became hybrid. If you don't have to be there, and then you have better participation. Because I remember very well that even at that time, we started running hybrid meetings in fact, it was all virtual. Before government then started relaxing it and became hybrid, it was all virtual. And during those virtual meetings, we're having better attendance at such meetings than we would have had with physical meeting at some point. So everybody embraced it. The important thing at the end of the day is that, are we achieving the goal that we have set out to achieve? And we saw that we were achieving that. So we worked with government. Vehicles were moving. We knew we agreed the timing they are supposed to move. We achieved, we agreed on the number of people that can sit in a vehicle at per time. And then we agreed that the protocol must be kept. And so we're able to go through it and did not have to lay off our staff at such moments. And the staffs are, in fact, glad and better. The union, everybody, we're all happy. It was as though COVID didn't come.
So from that lesson, what would you say is the take home for you as an executive of an organization, looking at the rapidly changing dynamics of the world of work with your exposure at the ILO? What would you say are your submissions on how a workplace is supposed to exist?
Thank you. The one very important thing I would recommend to every CEO is that we need to do again time studies around what we do. When I say time studies, you find out that most of us have become used to, we do it this way and we continue to do it that way because there hasn't been any issue around the way we're doing it. But you find out that a little study around some of this work will show you that, look, there is 1,001 better ways to achieve, if not better results, but at least the result you are achieving. So my recommendation will always be that, look, COVID has come and gone, but it has left us with the ability to think not just out of the box, but as quickly. Because during the COVID era, you didn't have the luxury of time to take a decision. You were taking decision as situation presents itself. And they worked perfectly well. So we were able to, and it has now come to stay. So what do I do, for instance, as an executive running an organization? I subject those, if I have to take a decision, I immediately bring to mind what it was at the COVID era, where there was no table for documents to lie. You have to work on that document. So each document that comes, work on it and get it out of your table. Because you are not sure whether by the next day the government will say no more work. And I've come to adopt that. And I recommend that for everybody. Whatever can be done, don't push it to the next minute, not even the next day. Whatever can be achieved this minute, achieve it. If you have nothing to do the next minute, and I can bet you there's always something to do, so don't push it to the next minute. Do it now and let it be done. And I've applied it even in personal life. Even in running NECA, as it were. What must be done now? Let's do it. And you'll be shocked that we've been able to come up with some of the best decisions adopting that model.
So how would you rate your relationship with the organized private sector generally, and also your relationship with government and labor? We understand that when you talk about labor, it's tripartite. It's not just one single leg. You need the other parties.
As then NECA president, former NECA president now.
He's still fresh.
So the part of the things we quickly had to settle into do, because at some point the secretariat of the organized private sector secretariat rotates among members of the organized private sector. I mean the chairmanship and then the secretariat. So at some point I was the chairman of the organized private sector, not just of NECA. Now, one of the very quick thing we had to do is to rally the other members of the organized private sector for us to see that we're not in competition. We're all for one goal. Nigeria must move forward. So if you are the one in charge of the commerce, the important thing is that Nigeria is moving forward. Businesses are better for it. We're serving our members as expected of us. So when we have labor adjudication issues, when we have employee issues, when we have commerce issues, when we have manufacturing issues, it is important to recognize that as much as you might have some form of knowledge around that particular subject matter, there are people who the organic setup avails them the opportunity to probably be more experienced in such areas. So, consultation. You have to consult every now and then to make sure that the organized private sector is working together. You also have to collaborate. You also have to make sure that at every point that you are taking a decision on behalf of the OPSN, everybody have a say. Whether small, because you have, of course, you have some small group of the, but if you are able to bring everybody together, and once we're able to speak in one voice, we achieve better results. So, in the same way, one of the things we did was to say, okay, the then Minister of Trade, and we had an opportunity of access to him, always. And that really helped. So every time we have a challenge, whether it is the forex challenge, whether it is tariff challenge, whether it is multiple taxation challenge, whether it is labor issue, we come around the table. we speak to the Minister of Industry, it comes, and then we make our submissions. Now, for labor, I think the posture of those of us in the organized sector is that labor is troublesome. Unfortunately, the same posture is what government takes when it comes to labor issue. But we decided to begin to pull labor along to say, no, it's not all about fight. We are all working to achieve a common goal. And the common goal is that our employees are better for it. And our employees can only be better for it if organizations are better. If the organization has an issue, then obviously the employers will have an issue. So we were able to come to some form of agreement with the labor union to say, look, it's not all about strike. We can always come to the round table, discuss matters rather than go on strike. And we achieved it so well.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.
There is always more to a story than the screaming headline. The part of a story that is not told casts a shadow. It's like the part of an object that is not reached by light. On TVC News, I'm able to explore the many angles there are to a story, talking to stakeholders, asking the difficult questions, and digging for facts. I believe the viewers are able to make a better decision if they're well informed and understand not just a part, but the complete story. TVC News.